Hi, I'm Bob Hancock from the Google Ads API Developer Relations team. Today I'll be talking with Carolyn Chou, the product manager for Performance Max. And Carolyn, thank you for agreeing to speak with us today. So we have a couple of questions which come from our developers. Now, I'd like to frame this first that I think PMax is one of those rare occasions where we can say that it is a true paradigm shift in the way that we approach digital advertising campaigns. You know, can everyone benefit from PMax, or are there certain types of customers that should or should not be using PMax?
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me here today. So great question. I believe and genuinely believe that PMax is something that advertisers across the board will benefit from. We deliver really great performance, and we've seen that through a number of our backend tests, a pre-post, A/B. You can prove this for yourself, but small, large, across all verticals, we've seen success on PMax. So we really do believe PMax is for everyone.
Great. So one of the things that really stands out with PMax is, in addition to the use of the generative AI, which is used for assets that we'll discuss in just a moment, is there also predictive AI that is used to improve campaign performance?
Yeah, so the generative AI, like creative work that we announced at GML this year was a huge, kind of like a huge announcement in part because it ties really well into like the Gemini, overall kind of Google efforts. But PMax has been using AI since even before like the generative AI work that was announced at GML. So with PMax, we bring you the best of AI and we do a lot of predictive modeling to kind of understand which which user to match which advertiser to, and you get that across all the channels that PMax serves on.
Hmm. Okay, so just for some of the folks that may not be clear, let's make a distinction between, say, predictive and generative AI. The predictive would be using the models to predict an outcome, for example, of a campaign. And generative, when we say that, is to refer you're creating an image or you're creating text as part of a campaign. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so um, the use of the AI generated assets requires customers to put let's say, a certain amount of trust into Google, saying you're going to change possibly a headline, et cetera. So, what are we doing to ensure that there's brand safety with these AI created assets?
Yeah, I think this is one of the top things with AI in general, and especially we know like earning your trust and kind of maintaining it is really, really key with Performance Max and at Google in general. So with the generative AI kind of creatives efforts, if you saw at GML, we can generate a number of different creatives and assets for you, but you ultimately have the control of whether or not it's used. You can make tweaks to the existing assets, you can make adjustments, or you can choose not to use them at all, and that's ultimately up to you. So you have the ultimate control there. We know brand safety is pretty much a non-negotiable for advertisers, so we do want to adhere to that, and meet your needs there.
Okay. Now, a big change with PMax is that we are using AI to generate some of the assets, as we said. So, how do I know that my generated or automatically created assets are really performing well across channels and giving me what I want, as opposed to me doing it myself?
Yes, yes, 100%. So one of the launches we did last year, and I was very personally involved in, was asset group reporting. And then this year at GML, we also announced asset reporting. So with the combination of those two, you can see how your asset groups are performing in Performance Max. The best practice there is to add more assets and asset groups to kind of up to the limits to kind of help the AI learn where to target and what performs well versus not. And then the asset reporting that we just announced will have asset level details of what's performing well and what's not. So your generative assets that you decide to use should be in that report.
Oh, so let me just have two follow-ups on that then. So when you say the asset reporting by channel, I'll be able to see how this image is doing, for example, in a search channel?
No, so it'll be asset group reporting and then asset reporting within PMax in aggregate. So there's no channel reporting. And the idea there is kind of, if it's performing well, it doesn't necessarily always matter where it's performing well, just that it is performing well. Because if your goal is ultimately performance on Performance Max, like as long as we're delivering that, we want to help you understand where to develop more creatives and enhance your existing creatives.
So then a best practice would be that I make a selection of, let's say, image assets that I think are really reflective of my business. I should upload as many of those as I can, because is it true that the more assets that a system has to work with, the more likely it is to be able to make a good decision?
Yes, very much so. That's why our best practice is generally add assets and asset groups up to the limit, help the AI have as much data as possible to really try to optimize against. And then from there, look at your performance, understand what might be resonating well versus not, and then add more of those types of assets. And along with asset group reporting and asset reporting, we have a number of different insights. So there's like the asset audience insight of like what assets are performing well with which audiences, things like that. We have a number of insights as well to look at.
Okay, so let me just pull back and look at it like I'm the CFO. I'm not the lower business person where I'm saying, oh, I want to understand how my image assets are doing here and in this asset group. I want to know, apart from, say, running an A/B experiment with the way I used to run campaigns and with PMax, how do I know that PMax is making the best decisions for me?
So I think what you mentioned about A/B experiments is like the ultimate way to kind of prove it for yourself. You also have pre-posts that you can do as well. But I think PMax does have a number of inputs that you can provide with to really guide the automation and also to ensure that we're adhering to your brand safety needs. So there's the content suitability. There's kind of content suitability guidelines. We have placement reporting. You can add placement exclusions. If your goal is like targeting new customers, we have new customer acquisition. We have a number of new kind of areas we're working on in that space to really represent your goals. So I think the main thing is make sure your goals are represented correctly in your Performance Max campaign. Use all the inputs that we have available to you to understand that. Then look at the reporting, asset group reporting, and the insights to see how it's actually doing relative to what the inputs you provide are.
Okay, so to grossly simplify the process, then I want to get assets which are descriptive of my business, upload as many of them as possible, and then allow the Google AI in the back end to perhaps modify or shape these, because the predictive models will learn from performance what the best headline is or the best description is, and will make all those decisions within that realm of brand safety, so there are no big surprises for any of your customers.
Yes. And if there are like hard brand safety requirements, I definitely recommend you double check those in the content suitability center and make sure those are set up correctly.
Okay. So that covers most of the main points we're looking at for developers. Is there anything else you'd like us to know about PMax?
With PMax, so I've been on the team now for 2.5 years since PMax went to general availability, and it's really changed over the last couple of years. The feedback that we get from kind of developers and users like you is really, really important to enacting that change. So continuing to give us that feedback is really important. The like asset group reporting, asset reporting, placement reporting, all of those reporting like launches were because of asks from advertisers and users like you. So keep the feedback coming, keep testing it out, let us know how it's going, and let us know what else we can do to make it work better for you.
That's great. I want to thank you very much for talking with us today. We're going to have a couple of other sessions after this, so folks, stay tuned after this if you are a developer, and we'll give you details how the developer's world is going to change. And at this point, I'll let Carolyn get back to make new products.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everyone.